Right, public participation. Any member of the public who is registered to make representations on a planning application on today's agenda will be invited to make their representations at the relevant point of the consideration. Right, so we'll kick off with the minutes of the last one, I think. Do we have a proposal and a seconder for that? Proposed, seconded. Very short meeting today then.
Not short enough, I might say.
Everybody agreed? Yeah. We want to planning application number 1. Planning application 21/0341, Beaver Bridge, Sowerby. Early Stephen, Charlie Alpha 17 for Echo Golf. I invite the planning officer to present.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application at the Beaver Bridge Inn in Rough Sowerby for the erection of a dwelling on site of former beer garden. Just point out that the application was originally for both the change of use of the pub and for the erection of a dwelling within the beer garden. However, this was split up with a new application submitted in December 2022 for the change of use of the pub, and this was previously refused by committee in May this year. This application for the erection of the dwelling in the beer garden has been brought forward in the interest of consistency. The application is for the erection of a 3-bedroom, 2-storey dwelling located to the south side of the pub. Parking will be provided by an area of cars standing to the front, and a private garden will be located to the rear. The property will be finished in natural stone to the front and rear and rendered to the sides. The site has no formal planning designations. The pub itself is not listed, but there is a large agricultural yard located to the rear. Yeah, so that's the location, site plan, and that is what it will. That one, sorry. Consultations, I've had objections from Highways, Environmental Health, and the Parish Council. I'd also like to point out, it is noted in the report, but the Parish Council's letter of objection have referred the pub as an asset of community value. Whilst there is currently a nomination submitted to the Council to list the public house as an asset of community value, this has not yet been decided and is completely separate from this planning application and the planning application process. As stated in the report, I've had 36 letters of objection and 1 letter of comment. These relate to sewerage issues, sustainability of the pub, overdevelopment of the site, impact on neighbours, issues relating to the agricultural yard to the rear, and highway safety concerns. Moving on to the main planning issues. The main issue with this application is the principle of the development. The main issue is that it will occupy the beer garden of the pub, and that the pub has the potential to reopen following the refusal of the previous planning application for its conversion. So, by allowing for a single dwelling to be erected within the beer garden, it would reduce the amount of outdoor amenity space for the pub, which could be detrimental to its future. We therefore consider that the development is contrary to local planning policy COM1, as it will impact on the sustainability of the pub going forward. This forms one of the reasons for refusal. Design and visual impacts, there are no issues with this. The dwelling is considered to be acceptable in terms of design as it corresponds to the character of the area. Residential amenity, there are some issues with this. The property will be sited an adequate distance from neighbouring sites, and so this is not considered to result in any adverse impacts to neighbours. However, the issue is more with the amenity of the property itself. If the pub were to reopen, they would be quite close to each other, and so there would be issues in terms of noise and disturbance from customers in the vehicles for the pub. In addition, comments by Environmental Health Officer has raised concerns about the agricultural business to the rear, which again could cause issues in terms of noise, dust, flies and odour. Whilst a noise assessment could potentially be produced with the agricultural yard to the rear, it's considered that the reopening of the pub would result in an unacceptable impact on the property, and so therefore forms a reason for refusal. Drainage, there is some uncertainty about how the proposed drainage will work. The application form states that the site is connected to the mains, but residents have claimed there is no main sewer in the area. Whilst this is an issue, further information could be asked for and dealt with by a condition. Highways safety, Highways Authority have now objected on the grounds that the pub could reopen at any time and therefore requires adequate parking. The dwelling would result in a loss of 2 spaces and could see the building of cars on the adjacent green. So that's the back. So it would go where the fence, the family fence is there, that's where the dwelling would go. So the highways concerns that obviously if the pub were to reopen, numerous vehicles would park along the front of where the dwelling would be at. There are also concerns that that the site doesn't allow for vehicular turning space, which could again cause further issues if cars are not able to reverse out. Only able to reverse out. Impact on highway safety is therefore a reason for refusal. And finally, nutrient neutrality. We have not received any information in regards to nutrient neutrality. But whilst this was raised to the agent, we decided not to pursue it due to the recent refusal of the previous planning application. In any case, due to the absence of any information, this also forms a reason for refusal. So in conclusion, the application we consider not to accord the development plan stated within the report and is therefore refusal for 3 reasons. These include the impact on the sustainability of the pub and its reopening, which could cause noise and nuisance implications, the impact on highway safety, and the lack of nutrient neutrality information. Thank you, Chair.
Right, now we've got the speakers on this one. So can I invite Steve O'Donoghue to speak first? And we've got 5 minutes.
First of all, I'd like to say that I own the plot.
That's it.
I own the pub, and we've owned it for about 11, 12 years now. And the pub won't be reopened in the near future. The community asset was refused the last time that they applied for it on the grounds of they didn't use the pub enough, I believe. And we feel that I'm not interested in owning the pub. It wasn't viable, we tried, we took a gamble on owning the pub. It was up for sale for a long time, nobody wanted it. We moved in the area and then bought it and turned it into a pub, a restaurant really, not a pub. And then it worked for a few years and then it just died off. And up to COVID, we shut before COVID. We couldn't make ends meet with the pub. I never took a wage out of the pub, me or Lucy. We invested all the money we had into new bits and pieces within the pub, and we just couldn't. It wasn't viable. We couldn't make it work, so we closed it, and it's been closed for 6, 7 years now, I think. It's been up for sale as a pub when it was open, which you have a fair chance of selling it. That's the best time to sell a pub. I've been in the pub trade for 35 years. Lucy, my son. We knew we're not Mickey Mouse people, we put 120% effort into the place. And my son is now running a hotel in Scotland, £2.5 million turnover at the Carskill, up on the North Coast 500. He was working at the Leeds Hotel in Borrowdale Valley. Me and my wife was pub managers for 30 odd years before we came to the pub. So the pub won't be reopening in the near future. That's all, not by me, unless somebody comes along with a massive pot of money, because it needs a hell of a lot of work doing. It's getting into disrepair on inside. I sold a lot of the equipment inside, and it all was new equipment for kitchen, and ovens and various fridges and freezers. The roof needs doing, it's going to be a lot of money, so the pub will not be reopening as a pub. By me, anyway. And then with the house situation, it'll be a house that someone's going to live in, it'll look nice, it'll fit in with the village, and if we get planning further down the line for the pub, it'll fit in with the village community. We'll not have it looking like the monstrosity that's just to the left, that's not on that picture, that's been erected. It looks like something from the Mayor's prison. I don't know how I got away with it, but there you go. And we feel a little bit victimised that we haven't, we've done everything, followed all the protocol, everything, followed all procedures, and met every requirement set out by the council and the rules. And we tried to sell it as an ongoing pub for 4 or 5 years. And a few people came, but nobody made a bid for it. So I think it's just time to move on. It's starting to look a little bit ratty now, the building, and it's just going to get worse and worse. So it won't be open as a pub. So I can guarantee it. And the new build will be a house for somebody to live in, not a holiday rental, which is plenty of them around town. And it'll look nice, being smart. There's a very similar property in Crosby Ravensworth, and it looks really nice, stone built. We just feel it's time to move on now from, like 8, 9, 10 years we've been at it, doing this. So, the pub inside itself, it's going to take a lot of, it's just, you couldn't open that without spending a lot of money on it. And nobody's come forward with that magic pot of, full bag of cash. Nobody's interested in it. And it's just going to, in fact, my next step is possibly boarding it up. Bring a bit of the inner city to the countryside, because for security reasons. I think the house will benefit the area. It'll look nice. And it'll be some place for the family to live in. They're building plenty of houses within Chilby Stephen, which is just 2 or 3 miles away. Not a problem to knock up 80 houses here, 40 houses there. We just want a little house built.
Okay, I think you've got your argument over. You've got your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I invite Councillor Collins to share a rough Salby Penrith.
Hi, good morning to you.
Morning. Also got 5 minutes.
I don't think it'll take 5 minutes, but let's go for it. As you said, I'm the chair of the Ross Salby meeting, and I'm here representing the parish. I'll just read off my script here, which is probably the easiest thing to do. The Ross Salby parish object to the development of the Bellabridge Inn Beer Garden to a domestic dwelling. The parish opposed this development and have submitted 88 signatories representing some 75% of the village objecting to the development and the loss of the existing pub beer garden. The application uses the phrase former beer garden in its title, inferring that a change of use for the Bellabridge Inn, references application 22/9/15 in May, has been approved when it clearly has not, and which was in fact rejected at the May Planning Committee. And so the garden still remains an integral part of the pub. The loss of its beer garden would be detrimental to the pub's overall sustainability and financial viability by reason of removing its existing outdoor community space for visitors, along with the loss of its available parking provision. It should be noted that currently no representations are in support and that 36 letters of objection have been submitted in addition to the above 88 signatories of objection. We don't wish to repeat the council officer's report, suffice to say that we agree with its content. It should also be noted that the site is the subject of a live ACV application, and we look forward to seeing that one approved at some point. The pub's sustainability and social quality. The likelihood of the pub's viability and sustainability to be compromised through this development is high, and which would invoke the likely permanent removal of a prominent and long-established public house, along with its potential to help sustain the area, and there is no alternative facility within everyday walking distance. It is clear that this application should be approved. It will be only a matter of time before a new application appeal for the change of use of the pub will be presented with the view of developing the site further, as was the original application plan. This clearly is an overdevelopment of the site and is strenuously objected to. Drainage, you've already said that in your report. No details of the proposed foul drainage have been presented in the application, nor details of where the existing septic tank for the pub, which is in the garden, will be relocated. Contrary to the applicant's submission, there is no main sewer in the locale to vent foul sewage, or indeed within a kilometre of the property. This assertion is backed up by the local property searches, along with statements from many objectors, including neighbours and others from within the village. To quote the officer's report, the application gives no indication of how the development will mitigate the highly contentious issue of neutrality in this protected environment. The plan outline, which you showed earlier, the extent of the property as shown includes a grass verge. Now, this is unadopted roadway or carriageway or footway. This is in error, and the land registry plan shows that the verge is unadopted. Unless the applicant can show that the strip of land is registered to them in their deeds, then the development cannot include it. Should the council officers require it, original plans can be provided to the committee which clearly show the limits of the property. Existing neighbours, not including the current applicants, have maintained and modified the verge for a significant number of years. To just add to all of that, the ACV that would apply for is for the park and the gardens. Statements that the property as a pub would not be sustainable by the owners. That's a matter of opinion, really. The pub has never been put up for sale to the locale. There have been approaches to the owners of the pub and verbally requesting a price, and those requests have been refused or not responded to. So it's not true to say really that the pub there isn't any interest in the locale for the pub. So there is a possibility that the pub could be, if offered for sale, it could be purchased, and the community would then benefit from that purchase because they would probably want to own the pub. I think that's all I have to say really in support in objecting to the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, members, do you have any questions for the planner? Councillor Wright?
I don't know whether this can be deemed out of order, but this ACV application, has that been submitted to the council? Deemed out of order, Andy?
No, I'm quite happy to answer the question, but I will caveat it at the end. The asset community development nomination has been submitted to the council. It is been out for consultation. Consultation ended last month, so it is due for decision hopefully within the next week or two. However, because the pub and the surrounding grounds are not currently listed as an asset of community value, irrespective of what either party has said about it today, it's not relevant to your considerations today, because it is not listed. So the future use of the pub, in that respect, past use of it, is completely irrelevant to your considerations today.
Any other questions? No. Can we have a proposal?
And you say?
Right. Well, I propose that we go with the officer recommendation. The simple reason that not to do so would be totally undermine the decision that was made 2 months ago. So that's my opinion. So do I have a second to that proposal? Yeah. Councillor Robinson. there any debate on the matter? Councillor
Even now, I'm going to decide whether to support your proposal or not. I know that the HPD is nothing to do with it, but COM1 is cited as a reason for refusal, and COM1 does say that I could do, if I could be, I'll get back to it, it could be basically, so if there's no longer economically viable and it's been unsuccessfully marketed for sale, I think it's met both of those criteria. The neutrality is outstanding, which I think is probably important in the current situation. I'm just concerned that this has been dragged on for so long if the HCV goes through and it's so long and good, but the residents have got to come up with the money, I would think, which is possibly likely. I think that's straight into Bubbling territory. As I said, I'm still undecided, but I'll make a decision as to this or two. Thank you.
Can I just add, because I'm very aware that members will have this as a community value element in the back of their heads. The legislation was not designed to stifle or prohibit the planning process. It's a very separate regime. The asset of community value regime was introduced by the Locals Act, and it was introduced to allow communities, if they felt that an asset in their community was so important to them that if it was put up for sale, there would be a delay on the selling process to allow them to raise the funds to buy it. So that's all it is. It produces a moratorium to allow people to raise funds. So, and the ultimate issue is that even if it's listed as community value and it's put up for sale, that doesn't mean that it has to be sold to the community if they put in an offer. So that's what it's designed to do. It's not designed to stop a planning application. It's not designed to stop abuse. It's designed to help communities buy their assets that they feel are valuable, if so desired. So please remember the distinction and try not to confuse them when you're making your decision today.
I'd just like to come back with a question. Is there a time scale after the decision we made about the community value that an offer is put in and accepted? In other words, how long does the applicant have to wait before he can be confident if he met all the criteria, he could come back with a planning application? Is there a time scale for the asset to be sold or not? In other words, is there a limit how long the applicant's got to wait after an asset of community value decision has been made, if we say it's in the positive, for the sale to go through basically?
So the way, if I understand the question correctly, the timescales for what's called a moratorium. So if the asset is listed in the next couple of weeks, there is an appeal process, but that's a separate matter. However, then if the owner then decided to put the pub on the market again, they would have to notify the local council. Then there would be a 6-week moratorium where they couldn't sell it, where any community groups would have the opportunity to register an interest. If they did so in that time, there would be a further 6 months moratorium, and that would give them time to raise the money, and the owner would not be allowed to sell the pub. But that doesn't stop the applicant bringing and I'm going to look at the plans at this point, it doesn't stop them from bringing back another application for the change of planning use at all. There's 2 very separate regimes and they run separately.
That's lovely. So the other thing you can bear in mind, members, obviously you've got to keep the 2 issues separate. Your remit is to consider the application against the development plan policies and any other material plan considerations. One of the key issues with COM1 is that it's incumbent upon the applicant to demonstrate that the pub in this instance is no longer economically viable. And they have to demonstrate that through evidence. And one of the issues we've struggled with really is to find out how it's been marketed, where it's been marketed, and how long, any interest has been expressed in purchasing it, what the actual asking price was. And that could then be a check to make sure that it's marketed at a reasonable value. Because the moment you don't know, it could be pitched at a level that would not be attractive to potential purchasers. And that's been a problem also with the conversion of the pub itself, as you remember, back in May. So until we've got that information, we're not really in a position to allow this asset, if you like, not a community asset, but it's still an asset in terms of planning policy, to be lost. Now, if that information comes forward, there's no stopping making a new application. If that information is made available, our position may well change as planners, and the advice given to you might be different. But we're not in that position, unfortunately.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much for the clarification. I know that I get pedantic sometimes, but you have clarified the situation, both of you, enormously. Thank you.
So, should we go to a vote then? Those in favour, just get the wording right then. The proposal is to so the proposal is to refuse the application. So can we have a vote on that? All those in favour? Yeah. So that application has gone with the officer recommendation to refuse. So the next application, which is planning application number 210441, Mandats, Stepstones Road, Local Hill, Feedlaw.
Just one thing. Yeah, the reasons for it is to show it's got
That's fine. Right, we're going to juggle things around. We're going to go to item 7 to free up the officer to get some work done. So, because she's got number 1 and number 7, which is particularly logical. So, we're going to 230207, 1 Townend, Clifton, Penrith.
So this application is at 1 Townend in Clifton, and it is for the proposed change of use to accommodate 3 number letting bedrooms serving the Georgian Dragon Public House, replace garage door with single pedestrian door, and the installation of fenestration in the form of new timber sliding sash windows in glazing bars finished with a white wood preservative paint, together with the repainting of the external elevations. So the application is for the change of use of the existing 3-bedroom residential property into 3 number letting bedrooms associated with the adjoining public house. The property will be subdivided with access to the first 2 first floor bedrooms via the existing front door and access to the ground floor bedroom through the existing side porch. The other external alterations, windows, doors and painting will allow the property to correspond with the appearance of the pub. The amended plans were also received a week or so ago with the garage being moved away approximately 0.7 metres away from the boundary with the neighbour to the rear, which was agreed between the applicant and neighbour due to structural issues with the boundary wall. I have provided an update supplementary paper, which I hope you've all had. It refers to an email that I received from Clifton Community Council and some errors that are in the report. Apologies, these are accepted as errors. I've incorrectly named them as Clifton Parish Council and they are Clifton Community Council, so sorry about that. And also, the Community Council referred to 2 applications when they provided comments in the same document, and unfortunately I got them mixed up. So within paragraph 6.3, that paragraph is actually irrelevant to this application. It refers to another application. All the observations listed below in what I think are relevant. These include concerns over the loss of the hedge to the front as it provides a shield from noise and lights, issues regarding vehicular access, and impact on council tax baseline should another permanent residential property be lost. Also another update which I only realised this morning and again apologise for. I have mistakenly named the neighbour to the rear as 1 Cumberland Close when it's actually number 35 Cumberland Close. I'll just show you now. So it's the neighbour to the rear, they share the boundary. I don't have a great picture, but it's basically this Queen rendered property here where they share the boundary. Yeah, they've correctly named it as number 1, and sorry, it's number 35, but it doesn't change the basis of the report anyway. I have 6 letters of objection and 1 letter of comment. These are outlined in the report and relate to issues of privacy, overlooking, highway safety and parking arrangements, noise concerns, light pollution, drainage issues and loss of a residential property in Clifton. Moving on to the main planning issues, the principle of the development is deemed acceptable. It complies with both policy EC4 and COM 1. The application site relates to a single property that is adjoined to the Jordan Dragon Pub, and such change of use into additional guest accommodation is considered appropriate in this location. The proposed fenestration changes will allow the site to appear as a fully integrated development within the street scene. Residential amenities. The main issue with this application is the impact on residential amenity, as I have received several letters of objection in relation to this. The application site is located in close proximity to neighbour number 35, sorry, not number 1, and the boundary between the 2 sites, as you can see, only relates to a low boundary wall. So there were concerns related to noise, loss of privacy and overlooking and delivery vehicles. It's also considered that the bedrooms as holiday accommodation could result in more comings and goings and more noise with guests and cleaning staff potentially arriving at different times during the day. However, it is considered that noise and disturbance could also be generated through a future household should the property remain as a single dwelling. The property has 3 bedrooms, so could easily accommodate an average family, and we would have no control over the activities of future occupiers. For instance, internal changes and the introduction of garden furniture and other domestic paraphernalia. It is considered that any noise impacts from the letting bedrooms could also be controlled by environmental health legislation should they arise. And we have also secured a noise management plan which can be conditioned, or which has been recommended to be conditioned. This states that a booking contract will be provided to guests regarding noise requirements, and that no stag parties, hen parties, deliveries or outdoor seating will be allowed. Also conditioned that no deliveries can take place within the site itself, and that no external lights should be introduced without consent. It should also be noted that environmental health have raised no objections in principle as long as the site is carefully managed through conditions. Therefore, subject to the conditions recommended, the development is considered acceptable in terms of impact on residential community. There are no issues in terms of design and visual impacts. The proposed external works will allow the property to integrate with the character and appearance of the pub. Highways, there are no objections from the Highways Authority, as the site would not have material effect on the existing highways conditions. The plans have been amended during the course of the application to increase the parking area and to allow for vehicles to turn on site. Part of the front wall will also be removed for greater visibility. Whilst there are concerns from residents regarding the impact on highway safety, consider that the impact will not be too dissimilar from the existing residential use. Nutrient neutrality has been reviewed by the Council's Environmental Projects Manager and with the Assistant Director of Planning, who have agreed that the site should be treated as an existing dwelling, in which case nutrient neutrality does not apply. And finally, in terms of other matters, comments regarding the loss of the property and reduction in council tax baseline have been received. However, these are not considered to be material planning considerations and therefore cannot be considered as part of this application. So, in conclusion, the development is considered acceptable when assessed against local and national policies and is recommended for approval subject to conditions within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Let me, nobody registered to speak in objection, but we do have another couple of speakers, so Chris Curry, please. Chris Curry.
You want me to?
Yeah.
You haven't got any objections to speak?
No. So you've got 5 minutes to present your view.
That's the problem.
It's correct.
Guys, it's already lit up.
It's on the system. Okay, thank you very much. I think we just heard from the last application the difficulty in running public houses, and the success of public houses now largely depends on whether you have accommodation available. We already have 10 bedrooms at the George and Dragon. This would add another 3 bedrooms, and it makes the property much more viable, with increased costs of labour for food service and increased costs for food. Whereas having accommodation, there are less costs attached to it. So the requirement for additional bedrooms from a point of view successful progression of the business is vitally important. We consider that the George and Dragon is a community asset. Certainly with the recent closure of the village hall in Clifton, I think that actually proves to be the case even more. With regard to the property, it was private residence for many years, and certainly the previous occupants had vehicle access, as you can imagine, including a wagon which was constantly parked on the drive or in and out of the drive. I think we have been fair with the accepting certain objections and sort of been happy to sort of consider these and make the appropriate adjustments. And certainly there seems to be a little sort of contradiction, so much that overlooking the property, certainly at the back, the windows will be frosted windows as the bathrooms. All the windows will be looking onto the road, with the exception of one which is actually looking admittedly across the garden, but up the road towards the middle of Clifton. There was a consideration with regard to car lighting. I think it was a condition of the planners that we erect a fence, but the objectors said that they didn't want a fence to erect in, because that would cut down the light into the garden. But we would say that perhaps a low fence would be appropriate if it was concerned about lighting from cars, etc., disturbing houses when turning. As far as the objections are concerned, if you'd like to go through those, they're listed a number of items here. Item 1, the object of the doorway at the front of the existing garage, to be used as a delivery point for food. We're happy to accept that. I think that's already been raised with the planning officer. The new door could cause a slamming. It won't be in regular use. The garage wall built on the boundaries caused structural damage. I think we've agreed that we're going to take the wall down, and there's going to be an alleyway created. properties, sorry. Yes, securing the future of the existing Bushland community, I think, is particularly important. As I've explained already, the need to have additional bedrooms to continue its viability is very, very important indeed. I think it's probably worth noting as well that, as far as I'm aware, we could have actually just converted it into an Airbnb, and I understand that we probably wouldn't need planning permission for that. We already have another Airbnb in one of our other properties, which we do rent, and they obviously use the facilities of the pub in our other village. But in this case, we felt it was the best option to actually turn it into bedrooms so that we can control the guests that are coming in and out of it, and ensure that the community is protected correctly. So that's what we are about to say.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. This application was called in to go before committee after a representation was made to myself as Community Council in Clifton on concerns about the actual application and the impact it would have on nearby residents, as has been included in the officer's report. I appreciate and thank the officer for the corrections to the errors in the report. However, the actual application that's been submitted, obviously, has been highlighted, is actually to remove domestic residential property from the housing stock in the local area. It's a change of use, which I believe is down to January, but it's actually a change of Class C2, if I'm not mistaken, from a current residential property, because it's integrated in it now. As has been alluded, it could quite easily have been made into an Airbnb, which this council has resolved to look to act on to help prevent the loss of domestic properties. The applicant has included in both their application and in the statement about the fact that the village hall in Clifton has been lost, which has absolutely no bearing on this application. This is for a pub that isn't a community asset. It's not registered as a community asset, so the inference about it being a community asset, again, should be discounted. Now, as a domestic property, the owner of the property could quite easily have converted it internally with no real need for planning permission. The external alterations may well require permission, the painting of it and things. Issues and concerns being raised about lighting, which there is a condition included in. However, the actual application submitted before you today is for change of use, yet the actual application forms and paperwork submitted say that there isn't a change of use. The actual application on the question asks, is this turning a domestic property into a commercial, says no. So there would be grounds to actually challenge the application as being invalid, that's been submitted before the council today. I am asking the council to consider the fact that this application is going to remove the domestic property in Clifton that has seen considerable demand with two, possibly a third housing development in the village in recent years. There is demand for domestic properties in Clifton. This property is neighbouring a number of residential properties, and the impact, regardless of conditions, that the Georgian Dragon's already got various conditions to its operations which are quite regular and not followed. The concerns of residents about noise, pollution and the impact on their enjoyment of their property is a real one that will have impact on daily lives of residents in Clifton. The concerns about highways, although it has been a residential property that feasibly could have had 2 vehicles in and out, including a HGV, are not the same as the impact of a property that has got visitors that are there for a couple of days, have no real vested interest in the impact that they bring on the community. The general of good neighbours, and neighbours living next to each other, you mitigate those issues that you would have with the throughput of a large number of visitors to the area. Now, we're all grateful and glad to see that the pub, after the fire reopened, it's understandable why the property was sold, because of concerns that arose as a result of that fire at the pub last year. However, this is a domestic property. This is a key location in Clifton. It's at the entrance point to a major housing development of 60 properties, close by other properties, and it forms a key part of the community. That entire row of properties over the years has been lost and incorporated into the pub through expansion. This would be the final nail in what was town end of Clifton, with the loss of the final domestic property into a commercial business. And I would ask planners to seriously consider that, on the grounds of the officer's report, did originally the recommendation contain errors that have been corrected, to consider refusal of this application today. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the planning commission come back on any points? No.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in response to Mr. Davis's points, you do not have a policy in your local plan which seeks to retain existing housing stock. So therefore you need to consider that very carefully if you're minded to refuse it on that basis, because that's the first thing a planning inspector would look at. So what does your policy say? Everything has to be considered on its merits. You've seen the report that it makes clear that it's a lawful existing Class C3 residential use that could be occupied by a family without any controls from a planning perspective in terms of how they occupy the house, noise, disturbance, the number of vehicles they park. This, in terms of its physical impact from looking outside the site, won't be any different from it is at the moment. It's a dwelling, it still will look like a dwelling. And the way it's going to be managed, we have got the ability to impose controls through those conditions. I've heard from the applicant that they're quite happy to sort of make sure it's managed correctly, because at the end of the day they have to live there as well, amongst the community. So I think, in terms of what we can actually, sort of hang a refusal on, it's extremely limited. I certainly wouldn't be confident about defending an appeal on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Right, do we have a proposal?
I propose we accept the officer's recommendation and approve this application.
Do we have a second? Councillor Cole. Right, any questions, debates? No. So would like to go for the vote then? All those in favour? That proposal is approved. Thank you. So now we're back to planning application 210441, land at Headstone Road, Loco Hill, Eden Hall.
Right, thanks, John. Okay, so the application for us is for the open portable frame covered building off Stagstones Road at Eden Hall. Just take through some photos and plans. So just the road is the white road to the north of the orange road. That's the A686, the line by slightly more detail, see the sharp bend in the road, which provides the access into the site. So that's the building which is proposed, open-sided, with about 1.5 metre concrete walls. Got a block plan here, setting out where the building would be located, and south of the building you can see it's going to be an earthworks just to help screen the building. Zooming out, it shows where the applicant is proposing to plant up hedgerows and trees to further help screen the building. Just close up there, showing where the building would be accessed. So at the corner of the road there, we've got an existing field access. They'll be proposing to make good that land and provide an access into a handling yard to the front of the building. And they've got some cross section showing how the land will just be built up to the side of the building to help screen it. Right, so some pictures now. So this is approaching the site of the application. And that's just a close-up there. You can see that the applicant has already installed the sheep pens there on the brow. A couple of years ago now, when I first visited the site, the applicant was already doing the earthworks to get the access in. I'll move on to that later. Well, here we go, actually. This did not form part of the application. A new access had been installed. You can see it's now closed and does not form part of the application. So this is viewing the site from the opposite side. So this is from the A686 looking back towards the site. And if we zoom in, you can just see some of the sheep pens and note that the land does rise on this side of the application site. So from the sheep pens itself, looking back to pens, looking back towards Spexton Road. And this is from the site looking towards the nearest property, which is just visible beyond the wall there. Looking back to the A686, and if we zoom in, you can just see a car on that road with the rising land beyond the wall. And looking back down at the new formed hard-standing track towards Stagson's Road. And this is the access which is now closed, so that visibility you can see is not good enough, but that's not the access that we use. And these pictures by the applicant of the current state of play with sheep handling pens in operation. Okay, so we've got some lake representations which need to report. That's okay, Jack? Yep. From the Parish Council. So I'll just read this as written. The Parish Council wishes strongly object to this application, firstly due to the nature of the road network this application will access onto, and secondly due to the clause in the design access statement which states, this is an initial application for a small part of the larger scheme. Eventually, however, this time the larger scheme is not being pursued for awaiting outcomes on the application under consideration. This clause in particular gives council a major cause for concern along with parishioners local to the site. The location of the development is off a narrow and classified road which is on the coast-to-coast cycle route. This route being used regularly by cyclists using this designated route, but also frequently by local families with young children. Site access is near to a sharp corner which has already experienced a number of cycling accidents. The narrow width of the road is such that to avoid heavy farm traffic, cyclists have to pull off the road. Local residents are already fearful of their children cycling on the road. The local community and road users have already experienced major inconvenience and safety concerns during last winter due to carriageway damage and severe mud deposits, resulting in contaminated runoff on this section of road, following excessive passing of large farm traffic. Highways, for safety reasons, have to sweep the road as a consequence. Increasing the heavy farm machinery in the area proposed will increase this risk. Many gates have been widened on this section of road to accommodate large agricultural machinery, which which the road network is not suited for. This is further impacting on road safety. Should this application be the forerunner to further development of this site, then the extra farm traffic the development will generate will, by nature of the road width and layout, create a very concerning road traffic issue. Cyclists generally, and especially cyclists with young families, being particularly at risk. The possible increased risk of a potential future fatality, God forbid, is not be underestimated. Before a decision is made in the application, we would ask that the above points carefully considered by Cumbria County Highways, and that approval is only granted if it's deemed in the long term safe to do so. We'd ask that Highways arrange a site visit when familiarise themselves with the exact nature of the road width and then potential hazards before a decision or recommendation is made. Whilst farming is changing, it cannot be at the expense of safety, hence the Parish Council's strong objection to this development. Okay, so I've got some representations from objectors. That's okay, Joe. Just summarise those. Thank you. So the first is let's come on planning on behalf of the neighbouring resident. They said that if the justification for allowing standalone new farm buildings resulting from the division of the previous established farms are held, then that would encourage a plethora of additional isolated farm buildings at fault with the traditional string farm infrastructure. Got concerned about the precedent that would be set. Without knowing the extent of the farm holding or any demonstration that this is a viable business, the building cannot be justified. The fact that landscaping fund is considered necessary suggests the building is not cited to minimise its visual and landscape impact. The fund itself is an unnatural feature of housekeeping. The local plan says that modern large agricultural buildings can, not designed and sited sensitively, have a harmful impact on the landscape character of the rural area. This can happen where the position in open and obtrusive locations, such as the crests of hills. The building in this location will therefore have a harmful landscape impact. So if I could respond to that, I'll say there is no precedent being set here. It is a farm subdivided, needing a new building to cover the extent livestock handling yard. Whether it's a profitable business or not, it's not relevant. It's simply to improve working conditions and to enable farm practice to take place and recover. The landscape will not be seen as an unwelcome man-made feature. It's quite modest, and the tree planting will in time screen this too. The building could be recited to reduce its landscape impact, but that would bring it closer to neighbouring residents. We've also had a series of emails from further objector, so I'll just go through some of the concerns that they're raising. These write directly to the officer's report, so I'll just respond to those in turn. Thanks, Joe. So the objector says the following material issues have not been addressed and been committed by the planning officer. Contends that buildings were available but were sold to be converted to a dwelling, and that the applicant could continue to use existing facilities at Ladyswood Farm, which could be extended on an alternate site should be located. Well, we believe the applicant moving on from Ladyswood Farm, whether it's their choice or not, we don't know. Either way, they tell us the use of buildings at that farm is not an option. The project says there's no reference to the chemicals used in the footbath, which will pollute the Eden and contaminate our domestic water supply, nor to the runoff from sheep foul waste, which will be concentrated in the area. The sheep from stress during handling and confined to a small area that's free draining. Stock will be treated by either a mobile dip or a pour-on treatment. Pest control treatment could pose a significant risk to groundwater in the area. The footbath was a temporary installation which we're sure has been removed. The agent confirms no chemicals used at the site and stated processes on site will simply be gathering and sorting sheep from adjoining land at various times of the year. It's just what happens now, but with a roof over the pens. And our report includes a condition requiring prior approval of an animal waste management scheme. The objector goes on to say that the lack of detail on the quantity of sheep or timelines associated with the handling facility, and describing it as high intensity, questioning what that means. Sheep handling facility will introduce effluent chemical discharge in a small area of tens of thousands of sheep. It's not similar to a field where sheep are grazing. Well, yeah, I would agree, it's not similar, but the sheep handling facility has been in operation already between 1 and 2 years. It doesn't require planning permission. The operation is subject to strict compliance with government regulations for agriculture as set out in our report. Jack says that no reference has been made as to how and where the impact of HGVs coming from all over the country will offload the sheep or being transferred to smaller trailers on the conditions granted approval for access and handling facility. But that's not subjected to planning control. You can't control that. That's out of the scope planning unit. Jack says no reference has been made to why the existing entrance to the site has not been closed as requested by highways and still being used. Well, I think the objective might confuse that the new access has been closed at the request of our highways officer, and that's conditional approval. The objective continues that the report doesn't address immunity impact on the objective's house, light pollution, noise pollution, dogs and vehicles. The site overlooks the objective's house and will be in view from its residents. But the intervening distance is about 300 metres, and we feel that that's sufficient distance. Thank you. The objective says that the trees providing partial screening belong to him and cannot be relied upon to provide shielding. That's agreed, but if the objective is concerned that the site will be in view from its residents, I can't envisage those trees being felled since they provide a form of shielding. The final point is that the application relies upon restrictions that are unenforceable, and the report submitted by the planning officer is failed to take the aforementioned major considerations into account. Just in conclusion, we've had to see how those restrictions recommended as conditional permission being granted will be unenforceable. We believe the report addresses all the material considerations that were raised during consideration of the application. If I could just summarise the application, thanks, Chair. The applicant rears sheep on land divested from previous farm holdings on land to the north of Penrith, creating the main sheep handling pens on the field off Saxon's Road. The application is to create a refurb of the pens and to create a car stand and delivery area, with the building being open to all sides. Citing this proposed plan to draw objection from residents and from cycling groups. The principle of new agricultural buildings is that they should be sited near existing farm infrastructure. In this case, the sheds would be isolated, but that's a function of startup agricultural holding. The applicant is farming land invested from other land holdings. There's reasonable justification, therefore, for a farm building on site, where sheep have been reared and sorted in pens for a couple of years. The landscaping appearance is to an extent a shared concern with the objectives, but given the tree planting and screening efforts proposed, the open side of the nature of the building, and the knock-on impacts of resizing the building, which would then closer to neighbouring properties, we consider moderate landscape impacts to be acceptable. How the proposal would affect the community of neighbouring residents is of paramount importance for this particular scheme, especially in respect of the natural spring, which is the private water supply for the next door property to the north. It's noted the land subject to the application is upslope from the spring and that the ground is free draining. To that end, officers have been particularly keen to obtain the views of our colleagues in environmental health on the potential ramifications of this proposal. Initially, the sheep footpath had been installed within the complex. This was a temporary measure that has now been removed. The application does not propose a sheep dip, and we would be conditioning this for any approval. No chemicals would be used to treat sheep on site. Concentration of livestock within the building would clearly result in increased levels of waste matter, and we're therefore also recommending a waste management plan collection and disposal of animal waste to ensure it can't contaminate the downslope watercourse or the neighbour's water spring. Given this, the environmental health officer stated they have no concerns of potential impacts on the type of water supply. In terms of other amenity impacts such as noise, smell, and light, we can't give much weight to the impacts arising given the distance to the nearest neighbour. The road's quiet rural lane on the route to the coast-to-coast like route, quite rightly, concerns are raised about dangers to cyclists from HGVs delivering livestock to the site. Photographs have been submitted showing HGVs temporarily blocking the road and cutting off the verges. We therefore recommend a condition of approval would be to prohibit the delivery and collection of livestock by HGV. New access had been opened up to the site soon after the application first being submitted. It was not part of the proposal and was unauthorised. Notwithstanding its landscape impact, had substandard visibility being situated next to standard trees. Following discussions with the applicant, this access was closed and we concluded a petition in our recommendation for the land to be restored. There are no concerns with use of the original access, and Highway Authority, having visited the site, has no objections to the scheme as proposed. Time statement accompanying the application sets out that this application would be the precursor to substantial further investment in the farm should it prove viable. That understandably would be cause for alarm for local residents given the potential further impacts of larger infrastructure. However, that would be subject to assessment should those applications be forthcoming. We can only consider the application for us. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Right, we have a couple more speakers for this one, so in objection, Daniel, Jason. Daniel, just press the button at the bottom and the little green light will come on. Press the button at the bottom. That's it.
There we go.
5 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, a little bit of due diligence. Can the committee please confirm we've read all the various documentation associated with this application? Thank you. Some context. As an analogy, I'd like you to imagine a small free draining area positioned 10 metres above a stream that in turn flows within 11 metres of a spring used for domestic water supply, and then onwards into the riverine, a triple SI site. Oh, by the way, the area is classified as a drinking water, safe belt zone, and drinking water protected area. Now consider siting an open laboratory in the area to be used by many tens of thousands of people, and for short measure, add copious amounts of formalin, zinc sulfate, and perhaps some other chemicals. Finally, let's position the facility so that it's in direct view and overlooking a listed domestic residence and drive lots of vehicles around, preferably with their lights on. And add some odour and barking dogs. What would your reaction be? My following statement includes some material emissions, some of which Matt Wilson, the planning officer, has alluded to, some of which have not been addressed. So my summary of objections: the facility will be used for handling tens of thousands of sheep per annum within a small area. There is no quantified amount of sheep that will be handled, stated in the application. This will have a direct bearing on the following: pollution of my spring and the river Eden. The planning officers appear to have a misguided view that handling many tens of thousands of sheep per annum in a small area is the same as grazing a few hundred sheep in a dedicated field. It is not the same. There is no reference, quantified analysis of volume of discharge to the ground, migration calculations, or any other form of analysis as regards the impact of faeces and urine from the sheep, which are naturally stressed during handling, chemicals, which are used for footbath treatment, and footbath is still present, or it was last time I looked. Pour-on treatments, which is a common process, which results in discharge of organic phosphates. In summary, the facility will introduce large concentrated quantities of effluent and chemical discharge into the beck, and my spring will become contaminated. I can refer you to a Savills report on this issue, which again has not been considered by the Environmental Health Officer or any of the planning officers. So let's look at the final thing on pollution is I'm seeking an undertaking by the WFC, Westmorland and Furness Council, that if my spring is contaminated, it will be rectified as a consequence. We have it tested periodically, and nitrate levels have been rising significantly. because of the applicant's farming practices. And the next time the tests are in, and if they're over the limit, we will be looking at the standards for themselves. Being overlooked, visual impact, light, noise and odour, the planning officers have not visited my residence, so how on earth they can talk about views from my residence, I don't know. My residence is a listed building, no heritage impact assessment has been undertaken. The facility will be in view from our residence and gardens. Light from turning vehicles at the site will shine directly onto our house. Prevailing wind is towards our residence from the site. Dogs used for sheep handling, vehicle noise and odours will carry to our gardens and house. Our house is a domestic residence. Our gardens extend up to the boundary of the proposed site. The facility will introduce more activity in the form of vehicles, noise and light pollution than a field set aside for grazing. The trees sited as screenage to the west of the site are not owned by the applicant, they're down dip as well, so if we decide to fell those trees, it will have no impact whatsoever on the view of the site from our house, but it will have an enormous impact on the view of the site from the roadside. Irrespective of this, if you look at the pictures, you can actually see that the proposed buildings will be seen directly from Stackstones Road. The impact from traffic, I disagree with the planning officer in as much that HGV vehicles coming in will have to be offloaded onto trailers. That's part of one of the ongoing conditions. Where that will happen has not been addressed or included, and it is an issue to the local community. Finally, if the offloading is going to be undertaken at the Ladies Wood Farm, which is part of the applicant's buildings, then why not simply extend this facility for all handling? Finally, general reliance upon enforcement and other agencies. The granting of approval by the planning officer relies upon a number of ongoing conditions. How will these be enforced? As an example, the existing site access was requested by highways to be removed. It did not. DEFRA, EA, planning enforcement and highways are all swamped with high workload in the land. This is a classic case of kicking the can down the road. There are no enforcement audit plans in place.
Your time's up.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Mr. Longworth. Microphone's still on, so you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm the campaigns officer of the Valley Cycle Group of Cycling UK. Apart from showing the access road is on the Sustrans Cycle Network in the Lakes and Dales loop, the highways officer didn't describe the characteristics of the road and issues of safety for cyclists. The road from Ranthorne is clearly a dangerous one. For cyclists, I would draw your attention to the following. There are steep bits, blind bends, deep dips, enough to hide vehicles. Agricultural and other vehicles bring mud onto the tarmac. Rain carries leaves, mud and stones onto the tarmac. The tarmac for the great part is narrow. To let vehicles pass, cyclists often have to draw off the tarmac. Where heavy vehicles draw off the tarmac, the edges get broken away, and when wet, often leave a trench deep enough to catch the front wheel of the bike and dislodge the cyclist. On Sunday, I saw a gap in the wall where a car had not got round the bad bend downhill going towards Langworthy. I'm told the car was there about a week ago, some evidence at least of the danger of the road recently. Opening the door to increase traffic on it increases risks, particularly for cyclists. Danger and unacceptable risk. The C2C for many years has been the most used Sustrans route in the country. Thousands of cyclists have and are using it. I think before COVID, about 2,000 cyclists a year were riding the C2C. C2C and, to a lesser extent, the Lakes and Dales loop are challenge rides. Riders include experienced, family, novices, literally all sorts, many raising money for charity, and they also bring money into the locality. So the next bit, where I've referred to figures, I'm quoting from your officer's report today. 972, Stackstones Road is very popular with cyclists, forming part of the coast-to-coast cycle route. Potential dangers for cyclists arising from increased numbers of heavy goods vehicles negotiating around cyclists, exacerbated by the narrow and twisting nature of the road, are highlighted as substantive concern. 473, cyclists taking this route on the C2C or simply passing through should not expect to have to encounter HGVs transporting livestock to and from a sheep handling centre on this quiet rural road, particularly when the main A686 runs by the opposite side of the field. 975 concerns raised that the HGV already use the road, presenting a danger to cyclists and pedestrians. Some evidence is presented of this about loading and unloading sheep. And that he then says he prays in aid of having a planning consent because conditions can be attached, which were regulated. And I doubt this conclusion. Obstruction of a road is a criminal offence. It would be easier and less expensive to proceed with a prosecution to prevent repetition. Conditions from assertions, say as to route, as to how many deliveries, when they're going to be made, can soon prove transient and fail to limit. Your officers report again, 976, it's understandable the proposal would give rise to concerns over potential increased conflict and dangers to cyclists and other road users, given the popularity of the C2C and the appeal of the local road network for cycling. I'm bound to say that the determination of risk and danger is yours, and I think there is adequate risk there to say that it isn't safe. It's implicit that there is an enhanced danger and or risk, as if conditions were not imposed, your officer is effectively saying that the application should be rejected. Conditions as to access in the round form end, does this restriction ensure safety for cyclists or increase risk to them? The route makes the vehicles come and leave the most dangerous way as far as cyclists are concerned. Use of conditions. They should only be imposed where they are necessary, but you have to be satisfied that the proposed conditions address the dangers adequately. Enforceability comes into it, proof of a breach, evidence of incidents, frequency, who by, do breaches have to be by or by persons in the control of the owners? Consider independent contractors who will be responsible for a breach, even if the conditions were broken with or without knowledge of those conditions. What becomes of other plans if there was a breach of condition, that then another site had been developed in reliance on operations on this site? The costs of enforcement evidence, presentation and outcome are all factors that you have to bear in mind.
What is your 5 minutes to an end, I'm afraid?
Right. I have one paragraph, could I just conclude that?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So we now have Catherine Siddle. You also have 5 minutes.
I'm Catherine Siddle of 2 Coatville Cottage, a local resident with strong objections to this proposed development. I'd firstly like the council to note that the parish council objected to this proposal and we are a statutory entity. As our Historic England, you should have been consulted due to the proposed development's proximity to the Loom House, which is a listed building. The issue of a listed building is a heritage matter, and there is no question about this application impacting the setting of listed buildings. A heritage impact assessment should have been provided and hasn't. You have approved a local plan which sets out this council's approach to the new agricultural buildings in the open countryside, RUR2. New agricultural buildings says that these buildings should be integrated into existing farm complexes where possible to reflect the traditional clustering of rural buildings. The only reason why this is not possible to integrate a new farm building into an existing farm complex is because the existing farm buildings have been sold off. In 2019, there was a separation of land from the buildings where the Loom farm was sold in lots. Some of the buildings were converted to residential use, and now there is a smaller land holding, and the applicants are wanting a new farm building. I refer to item 10.1. The need for development on this open field arises from the land holdings of the former landowner being sold off, leaving this as an agricultural parcel without any farm infrastructure. And that's not quite true. The smaller land holding did originally include some farm buildings, but the applicant chose to sell these off to his planning consultant, Mr. Daniel Addis, who converted them into residential property where he and his family now reside. Mr. Ellis is now helping the applicant with his proposal for a new farm building at a different site. I asked the council to consider if this is all above board, selling off existing farm buildings to a planning consultant for him to convert into his own residential property at the same time as helping the applicant propose a new build on a greenfield site because they no longer have farm buildings. The applicant indicates the estate carries out various agricultural activities but provides little information as to the nature of the current farm holding. No agricultural appraisal is provided to show there is even a viable and profitable farm business in existence. Without knowing there is at least a viable farm holding, a new building cannot be justified. Even if members are able to find justification for a new farm building, then you must surely agree that the siting of this building is inappropriate. The applicants themselves know the building will be prominent in the local landscape, so therefore propose to try and hide it behind a 2 to 3 metre high earth bund. But the bund itself would be an unnatural feature in the local landscape, and in my view the development will have a severe adverse impact on the local landscape. The applicants in their defence on the local landscape issue provide several photographs and say, this is the view of the development from the only point of observation on the A686 heading west, a fleeting glimpse as vehicles round a very prominent and dangerous bend. It is suggested that eyes will be firmly on the road in order to make the bend. In essence, the argument is that nobody will be able to see the building and the bund because they'll be too focused on the dangerous road to notice it. I hope members cannot sign up to this most ludicrous argument. The explanation of RUR2 says moderate large agricultural buildings cannot, if not designed and sited sensitively, have a harmful impact on the landscape and the character of the rural area. And this can happen when they are positioned in open and obtrusive locations, such as the crest of a hill, and this is the case. In conclusion, this proposal is contrary to policy RUR2 because there is no justification for a new agricultural building in an isolated location in the open countryside. The applicants have not provided any information to indicate there is a viable established agricultural business. Simple dividings up of a farm holding, selling off land separately from the buildings that serve that holding, and then allowing new buildings will set up a dangerous precedent that may be followed in many years to come. In my view, the proposed development would have an adverse impact on the land, which is not acceptable. And I ask you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, if I may just clarify, the final speaker still made a comment about the applicant or the owner of the land selling some land to Mr. Ellis, who's in the room today, and also his subsequent development. And I'd like to clarify that I think the comments given the forum and what you're deciding were appropriate, and I'd ask that the committee disregard those comments, please.
Now, in support of the application, I'd like to invite Mr. Ellis.
Chair, I've also got the applicant, Mr. John Errington, who'd like to speak.
I'll speak for just a short while.
Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have a lot to say because I'm not that well educated young man, or an old man now, sorry. In 2019, I bought half of the farm. As what has happened with a lot of farms in our area, the value of the substantial and very good farmhouse and the sandstone buildings was sold to a higher bidder, which is fine. We bought the rest of the land. We've continued to farm it as a traditional farm, as the farmer before had done for 70 years. Feeding sheep, growing crops, growing grass, and feeding the barley that we grow back to the sheep. The original sheep pens were in the farm buildings that were sold. They were undercover for the farmer and his staff to work in inclement weather, which we get a lot of. We built a new set of sheep pens. There was an ordinary government set of sheep buildings right in front of the applicant's house, the listed building, right next to the telegraph pole, which they will know that's there. And I choose not to rejuvenate them and do them. I moved it further away where it was safe. It was safe for myself and my staff, and safe for the dogs, to keep the noise of the dogs away. As you can well imagine, we've got a few sheep, and you work with the dogs with the fence, and I want them safe. I don't want them beside the road, because it's dangerous to the dogs, dangerous to people. And so just continue to farm. I've said nothing about large amounts. There's no chemicals used, because any of the chemicals used will put the other farm. The animal welfare, which concerns me whilst we build the pens there, it is too far to walk the sheep for 2 miles back to the farm and then back again in 1 day. And I know with experience, when you walk them too far, you get too much mortality and death. You walk 500 sheep and you'll have 2 dead. You might have 2 dead in the morning and 2 dead the next day. Causes pneumonia, causes other health problems. So we need the pens there, and we had one young man that's left us. We've been nearly 3 years in this application, and because he felt our facilities weren't good enough to keep a young man of 25-year-old and he's going to work on under that. I would like just to have undercover and then our people and yourself to work undercover. We don't work all night and all day. We work a lot all day. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I won't be. I've heard a lot said about the van vehicles. We've got 3 van vehicles, and they have a top speed of 40 kilometres an hour, which is 25 miles an hour. So if by using them on the highway, we're breaking any rules, there's no rules to say at 25 kilometres we do, at 25 miles an hour we do it. Thank you for your time.
Do I get fresh 5 minutes? Yeah, exactly. I won't take that long. Good morning, members. My name is Daniel Addis, and I'm a planning consultant representing and speaking alongside the applicant. I think from a planning assessment perspective, the most important thing to acknowledge is that the application primarily seeks to cover over an existing sheep handling facility with an open-sided structure. It includes a track is proposed, and also a modest area for parking and turning. Some minor regrading of the land is also proposed, and tree planting. The proposal seeks to improve an existing facility rather than creating a new one. The justification for the building is animal welfare and the welfare of staff. This is particularly so during the cold and wet winter months when a covered area is needed. The recently sold traditional buildings, as referred to by Mrs. Siddle, were completely unsuitable for sorting sheep. They were traditional buildings of no agricultural use, and this is proposing a new modern steel frame shed, totally different. We note the local objection to the application, and specifically the parish objection, which has triggered the application to be heard at committee today. The parish is particularly concerned with the future expansion of the site and what might come next at the site. As it stands, this application is just for an open-sided building to cover the existing sheep handling facility. The parish is also concerned with road safety and vehicle movements. Highways have visited the site and are happy with the access. Vehicle movements will not actually change whether or not the sheep handling facility is covered. It is regrettable that when the application was submitted, it was promoted as the first application to develop the site. This was done by the previous agent who believed that this would help the application. In fact, it has had the opposite effect, and this is obvious, particularly from the parish council's response to the application. The application is accompanied by an extensive landscaping plan, which will in time lead to softening of the visual impact of the proposal. The application is for an agricultural building in the countryside, a common site throughout the county. It is not garish or offensive. It is needed to support the farming use of the land. We note the concerns raised from the third parties as set out in the committee report, and while some of the points are relevant and raise relevant issues, the assessment of the impact of the proposal has to start from the basis that the land is already in use for unrestricted agricultural purposes and the sheep handling facilities, including associated traffic movements, are already occurring. The applicant located the sheep handling facilities away from the nearest houses as best he can to take into account site constraints, including trees, access, safety, water courses and topography. The building needs to go somewhere, and as the case officer has said, in either direction would take it closer to the nearest dwellings. Local plan policy RUR2 supports the principle of new agricultural buildings away from the main farm where they can meet 3 criteria, minimising its visual and landscape impact, retaining existing planting and introducing new native planting, and utilising subdued colours to reduce prominence. Under each criteria, we agree with the case officer's assessment of the proposal as set out in the report before members today. We consider that the policy requirement is met. As a final note, we would reiterate the importance of farming to the district. This is a rural, working landscape that supports jobs and the wider rural economy. Many people who move to the countryside expect a rural idyll, but in reality it is a working landscape, and farming is a commercial enterprise operating all hours, all year. The shed is needed to support the farming enterprise in the interest of animal and staff welfare. The applicant submitted this application in May 2021, and it has taken over 2 years to get to this stage. The process has been complicated by nutrient neutrality and council staffing. We are pleased the application is finally before members, and we are hopeful that it is viewed favourably today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Just come back on a few of those comments raised. It's clear that the pivotal consideration is the impacts of this proposal on water supply of the Lewin farm. And this application was due to be heard at committee previously with a simple no objection comment from an environmental health officer. Cognizant of the significant ramifications of the proposal on water supply for the neighbour, it's taken some work to get a more tailored response from our environmental health colleagues, in particular respect of water supply impacts, that consider the proposal in respect of no chemicals being used, a waste management plan being a recommendation of approval. They're satisfied that it will have no adverse impacts. The cycling impact, yes, of course, that's noted, but there are conditions recommended as part of the approval at the behest of our highways officer who has visited the site. We feel that that's acceptable. I don't agree that there's a need for a heritage impact assessment. This is a farm building on farmed land. It's not out of character, given the distance involved. We don't feel that there's a heritage impact. We've previously addressed the principle of allowing an isolated building away from existing farm infrastructure. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions? Councillor McCall?
Yeah, I just looking at the recommendation which says, upon completion of the construction phase, there should be no vehicular movements by HGV site. From what I can gather from that, that's the through world that anybody can use with any vehicle at the moment. How would you enforce that? Or maybe the family sites in the area should also use HGVs or wagons taking steps for those are shortcuts?
Well, the condition specifically relates to accessing this site. We have no control over whether HGVs use maximum shoulder to access other sites. But in terms of the application before us, HGVs have been used. The residents have informed us of that. I'm sure they will continue to do so if the applicant or contractors use HGVs to access the site. But it's a condition of approval that we're recommending that HGVs should not be used.
Chairman. I'm curious to know the acreage of the land in Hogan.
I have been part of the plan, it's not on the presentation page, it does include land extending north from the site beyond the Leven. I'm not sure of the exact acreage, right?
The acreage is 250 acres. I can't believe hectares, but nearly 100 hectares down there.
Thank you. So therefore, 6 to 10 sheep per acre, 2,500 sheep on the site, is that right?
Although I would caveat that with saying, at certain times of year when we have grown crop for the sheep to eat in winter, on the dry, free draining soil, there could be 5,000 sheep, and in summer there's no sheep. The numbers vary. I said a lot of the farms in our area, and there's Mrs. Sickles, her parents used to feed sheep on the neighbouring farm. I was doing it, and the farm where I live at that was doing that for generations.
Thank you, Chairman. So, 975, the supporting statement conveys the movement of sheep on-off facility will be monthly or weekly rather than daily, and so can be considered normal farming practice. I think it's the amount of movements that are concerning me, and what constitutes a standard in 975 by the planning officer, what constitutes a standard agricultural vehicle. I haven't worked out what the standard agricultural vehicle is. There's no in farming, become no shapes and sizes. And also the fact that it's a tractor with a wagon attached, which will be probably the same size as a 10 tonne or more HGV. So, you know, it's actually getting to the real facts of what are those movements going to be? How much is it going to be? How much is it going to affect the C2C? Is it really? I can understand what Matt's saying. I know the road well, I've ridden around it on horses many years ago. If you're taking an HGV down there, you are going to do a purpose. You're not going to go cut through. But the implications that this has for the C2C and also for the residents does concern me. And I do wonder why the access has actually got to be on that side, on that road, and not off the A686, which is much more geared to larger vehicles. So I have some major concerns. I haven't discussed it with the parish council at all, because this was probably going before I actually came as a councillor. I don't know if Councillor Hanby has, but I have grave concerns about this, because I'm not sure if it is a normal farming practice. And I know about moving sheep, but lots of farmers have no choice but move sheep and move them between the fields and the holdings. So Chairman, I do have some grave concerns.
Well, yeah, I'll just reiterate that the condition there is to prohibit HGVs, which obviously would require movements by tractor, pulling trailers, yes, but at greatly reduced speed as opposed to an HGV.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just direct members' attention to the comments received from the Highway Authority. They're not objecting to the proposal or the proposed access or the nature of the development. Certainly, that would involve HGVs as well. I haven't even commented on that. So I think we need to be realistic and pragmatic about the likelihood of how much impact this is likely to have on the local road network. And certainly, if members are sort of concerned about this, and maybe to the point where they might be considering a refusal based on highway safety grounds, just bear in mind that we don't have any technical objections on that basis from the highway specialists. So I appeal we may have a difficulty justifying that position.
Okay, do we have a proposal? the office recommendation. Okay. We have a second. Councillor Murray. Right. I'd like to shower for the proposal. Against? Abstentions? Thank you. That proposal is therefore carried. So we now move on to the third application, or fourth, if you remember them around. Application 220303, Land Office at Law Limited on Elba Road, Penrith. That's you again.
Right, thanks, Chair. Okay, so the next application is for a new diner drive-through off Cove Road on Gilwilly, Eden Business Park, Penrith. So the application is as I say, for a new diner. This is before planning committee because it's technically contrary to the local plan. In respect that the land is allocated as employment land, a diner doesn't constitute employment use. So the site is to the north end of Gilwilly. Some of the units to the north have been developed, some of the plots rather. This particular plot, as you can see, is currently undeveloped. This is the land holding, so it only represents about a fifth of the total land holding for the diner. That's just representing the hard surface area. So the diner would be in the corner of the plot with parking and the drive-through facility on the west-hand side. Some elevations at the diner as proposed. Just take you some photos of the site. So this is a unit currently developed to the north. Coming back into the site. So it's opposite the Lloyd building there. It's got the MKM building supplies unit at the far end. And back to the side of the access. So just to reiterate, it's before you because it's technically designated as employment land as a diner. That's not a use that would be mixed with that local plan policy. There will be staff employed, obviously, to manage and run the site. But we feel that allowing this plan would unlock the rest of the site, which has been undeveloped and, for a number of years for further employment land. There's a gap for a diner. We feel following the closure of the Rooster diner on the way into Gilwilly. So for those reasons we recommend approval. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a representative from the mayor, Elliot? No. Right. So we have nobody to speak on this one, so anything further to add now?
Yeah, sorry, I just add that as it's part from the local plan, we've had to publicise it as such, and that publicity period carries forward for a further 9 or 10 days from today's date. So just recommending if members wish to approve it, that it's subject to no further, no comments being submitted in that intervening period. If any comments are submitted, we would bring it back to committee for further consideration. Thanks, Joe.
Right, do we have a proposal?
Yeah, I'd like to propose the officer's recommendation. I don't think this is very controversial, and I think it'll be a good addition to the display. Thank you.
Second. Councillor Rollins. Right. All in favour? Unanimous. On to the next one, which is 220507, and South West of Westmorland Road in Appleby. It's you again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just find the place. Yeah. Right, so the application has previously been to committee last December. I'll just take you through some slides. So it's for 25 dwellings at the Brownfield site, Westmorland Road in Appleby. Within Appleby, that's the layout. So, I'll read first. Okay, so this is a scheme submitted on behalf of the Home Group, which is a registered social provider. They submitted last year for 25 dwellings on Brownfield land in Appleby, and this was granted at committee in December, subject to the details of Section 106 legal agreement being satisfactorily concluded. Section 106 was to address details of off-site nutrient and charter mitigation and secure affordable housing. As a housing provider, Home Group has a mandate to provide social housing, and to that end, the 10-year fund, as set out on the original application form, was for 16 social affordable rental properties and 9 affordable homes. Section 106 therefore initially sought to secure all the dwellings in perpetuity as affordable dwellings. Development rests on Home Group securing the necessary grant funding from Homes England, the terms of which require some flexibility in the ownership of shared equity units. This allows for customers to increase their percentage ownership in shared equity homes in standard practice. The sole consideration then is modifying the terms of Section 106 to secure 30% of the units through the legal agreement as affordable homes rather than 100%. So, two key issues to note. All the units would still be built and provided as affordable homes, a mix of social rent and shared equity, as per the agreement to Home Group and funding provided by Homes England. Secondly, our plan policy allows us to secure a maximum 30% of balance affordable housing through any legal agreement. As such, maintaining the legal agreement at 100% affordables would be contrary to our own policies. We therefore cannot seek to impose controls on dwellings beyond the scope of the planning policy. The remaining dwellings will still be provided as a mix of social rent and shared equity affordable homes by the registered social provider. We're therefore suggesting Section 106 be very in accordance with planning policy. Just read out the statement if that's okay from the agent who couldn't attend today. Thanks. Okay. So the agent said, grateful to read the statement out. I think it's important to reinforce to the committee that the application will be 100% affordable housing, and that will not change, but the Homes England funding is necessary to deliver the development and it cannot proceed without it. So the agent says that we've reviewed the comments made by the housing team on proposal and disappointed to read the comments which infer that the less than 100% affordable schemes being delivered on site, the sites being funded by Homes England grant and recycled grant from other schemes managed by Home Group. This is a 100% affordable scheme. While it's been made clear to interested parties throughout the process that due to the rules around funding received from Homes England, the shared equity product cannot be controlled through Section 106. We're happy that 7 rented units are controlled in accordance with the policy position of 30%. It's important to note that Section 106, in order to be lawful, cannot require more affordable housing than is required by policy. We cannot believe the Housing Department would rather have the scheme fail than be approved as policy compliant and able to benefit from funding which is nationally controlled through Homes England. There's no departure from the Council's policy. Policy requires 30% affordable housing to be delivered on site. This is complied with. The remainder of the affordable homes are outside this requirement would not fall into the control of Section 106. While they are controlled by the requirements of the grant funding received by Homes England. Comments made in reference to Council's funding for environmental improvements are not relevant to consideration of the planning application. The proposal is wholly compliant with local policy for the delivery of affordable housing. It's only possible with funding from Homes England, and put simply, without this, the scheme would not be viable. It would deliver 100% much needed affordable homes, 16 for rent and 9 shared equity, maintained within the former Eden district, and is controlled by grant recycling requirements of Homes England should then the property be disposed of. Trust the committee continue to support the scheme which is delivering housing in the main town and the brownfield site, providing lawful policy compliant Section 106, and providing wider affordable housing delivered in partnership with Homes England. The schemes a positive addition to the town and the wider district area. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Do we have a proposal? Councillor Murray? Proposal. Seconded? I'll second it. Right. Go to the vote. Oh no, gosh, we have some debate first. Is there any debate to be had? Right.
I've got a question. I heard what you said, I read what you said, that's still quite unclear. The 70%, the implication is that they are going to be affordable, but they're going to be able to be bought by the residents up to 100%. So after that, they become potentially market-led dwellings.
That would be within the rules of the Homes England funding. We can control up to 30% of the dwellings, the tenure, by policy, but we can't control the tenure of those dwellings through the legacy of Section 106. That would be beyond the scope of the affordable housing policy.
Okay, so potentially it's a bit like selling the council houses. 7% could be bought by the tenants or the residents and then sold on as market-led properties. Is that correct?
That's beyond our control. This could be submitted by a market housing developer, the 7% market housing and 30% affordable housing, and we would have been happy to recommend that for approval. But this is from a home group, a registered social provider. They're just seeking to sign up to a Section 106, which is in accordance with the terms of Homes England grant funding. So they've been told they can't sign up to a Section 106, which requires 100% affordable housing. So because it's not policy compliant.
Okay. But could you just elaborate on what happens to the 7% potentially? Are they going to be presumably now not going to be retained under the ownership of the Home Group? that they could be share equity with the residents who would eventually be able to buy up to 100% of the house, and after that the house becomes theirs to do with what they wish. Is that correct?
Chair, if I can help. I think the fact that it's a registered provider who are the end user of this development, Atkinson's or the applicant, they'll know about. It will depend very much on the contractual arrangement they have with the residents of each of those houses. They're not all going to be shared ownership. I think the split was 9-15, was it 9-16? 9-16. So there will be 9 for rent.
Is that affordable? Is that the affordable?
Yes, in terms of what the Section 106 agreement will secure, it'll all be affordable rent. Now, I think 9 of them will be for shared ownership across the site, none of which will be subject to the 106. And there will also be a number of affordable rented properties within the remainder of the other 70% of the site, if you like. We can't get involved with that as planners. And although it's possible that it could staircase up to 100%, normally 80% is the limit, and the 20% is still retained by the registered social landlord. We can't control that as planners. So, I certainly would not recommend you use that as a reason for refusing this, because you certainly won't get anywhere out of that deal. But the fact that it's not a private developer who's the end user, it's a registered provider, and they've said that they will be retained as, within whatever contractual arrangement will be as affordable. That's as much as we can count on as a planning authority.
I'm still wise about
I think what you need to concentrate on is the 30% that we can control, will be controlled. What happens beyond that is outside of our control as a planning authority, unfortunately.
Is there any further debate? Shall we go to a vote now? Do we have a vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the moment Councillor Robinson.
That's right. All those in favour? Right, so that's that one concluded. We move on to the next one. (22) 0815 for a reading room. If not, that will be.
Thank you, Jim. Unfortunately, the case officer was at laryngitis, so she couldn't be here today, so I've got to present this one. The application is a site within the village of Knock, near Appleby. And practically the previous screen, it's that one there. It's on the north side of the main street through the village. And it's quite an attractive village. It's got lots of traditional sort of terraced and two-story sort of detached houses that face onto the street. This site used to be occupied by a cottage, or a pair of cottages, I think, whereby obviously since being demolished. And this building is referred to in the description and also in the application as the former reading room, which has been there since sort of the early Victorian times, but it's in a state of dereliction. And what they're proposing to do is to build a dwelling, a two-story dwelling on the frontage, and then disassemble, if you like, and then reconstruct this building on the same footprint, but with an extension at the back. And that will then form a residential annex to the main dwelling. It won't contain any bedrooms. It's a studio and sort of a balcony area at the back, and some storage. So that's the proposal in a nutshell. Just go to the next. So here we go. So this is the existing site. It's a two-storey house, mosaic house to the side, lane to the side separated from orchard house, and there's a lane at the back as well, from which they will gain access for 2 parking spaces and a small